How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto becomes the demon fox and got harem with Moka? Part 1. Huge shout out to RogueRoguePhoenix for this story. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. It had taken him 15 years, much of which, sabotage and outright assassination, had become a norm in his entire life. But finally, after meticulous planning and assimilation, he had achieved his true ambition. The sight before him now was one that he enjoyed to the fullest. Uzumaki Naruto watched in open satisfaction atop the crumbled Hokage monument. Below him, fire consumed the accursed village, mingling with the screams of the scared and dying. The air was thick with the stench of smoke and burnt flesh. Yet it was a smell of victory to the young blonde, an accomplishment that he had yearned for ever since he had been but a child. The village deserved it. No one had seen fit to acknowledge him as a human. In fact, he was treated as the lowest of the vermins in society. He had to fend for himself ever since his toddler years, and the only refuge he received was in the wilds, mingling with the beasts who recognized his hidden power. They treated him as a demon, so Naruto saw fit to become one. He eventually found out about his tenant and in sheer cunning and control, assimilated the demon fox into himself, becoming the next Kyuubi. Ever since, he had methodically planned out the destruction of the village, going so far as to create the persona of a happy idiot with big dreams of becoming the Hokage. The ruse had worked and he continued to grow unnoticed by his peers. He maintained his persona for quite some time while secretly began to gather onto him a multitude of abilities and allies. It continued this way until Naruto was sure that everything had fallen into order. His first order of business had been to take whatever advantage he could get in the shinobi world, whether they be political or blood. His unwitting teammate became the first to offer his aid against his will. Taking the uchiha Sharingan had been so incredibly easy, and his look of absolute shock and horror had only been the icing on the cake. His new eyes were set and thanks to his ability to harness Yaki, Naruto had mutated uchiha Sasuke Sharingan into something else. Itachi, who had arrived soon after, commented on how it might have been a permanent manjikyu before Naruto killed him. If he didn't have a permanent Sharingan before, he certainly obtained it after Itachi's death. The next order of business was to eliminate all possible obstacles that may stand in his way. Jiraiya, Tsunade, and his so-called friends from the academy were all butchered by him. Their shock at his betrayal only made their deaths all more easier to create. It was almost sickening at how easy it was to betray them all, at how their eyes widened with sheer disbelief that it was Naruto, the so-called idiot with a heart of gold, who stood on top, watching them bleed to death. A part of him supposed that a dream long since lost would have been fulfilled had he retained that persona. But vengeance had long since destroyed that dream, and nothing short of Konoha's utter destruction would have satiated his desires. And that desire had been fulfilled. Without their great leaders and defenders to protect them, Konoha was absolutely defenseless when he launched his path of carnage. No one was spared, not even the women and children. In his eyes, all who bore the symbol of Konoha on their person was an enemy. And by nightfall, he had smoked his enemies and ruined their homes. And with this, I take my leave. Naruto turned and walked away. There was nothing to remember the village now aside from the burnt ashes and the desecrated faces of the Hokage monument. By daylight, shinobis from all around will have sent scouts to check on just what happened. Soon, the loss of the strongest shinobi village will have created a power vacuum, and infighting would occur. Naruto left with a smile, knowing that this marked the destruction of the shinobi world. The young blonde casted an eye back towards the ruins once more, feeling just a hint of nostalgia and regret. Though he had been absolute in his mission, there were a few that he might have allowed to live, were he to have not hardened his heart. Hinata, who had been nothing but good to him, was one that he might have had started a relationship with. For a time, him being with her had been a pleasant dream, where he was not the village's bane, and she was not the important heiress of a powerful clan. But like all dreams, it had to end. At the very least, he killed her as painlessly as possible, and she seemed to have understood even as she lay dying in his arms. He gave a small, sad smile, and never looked back again. Naruto raised his arms and began chanting in the demonic tongue of the Bijuus. Ancient knowledge flooded into his mind, and the air began to distort all around him. Were anyone still alive near him, they would have been utterly shocked at the amount of Yaki that was being released. Its volume was so great and thick that it looked as if a new fire had suddenly sprung up from atop the mountains. Finally, the distortion in the environment gave way to a tear, opening up to reveal a river of energy. Naruto slowly lowered his hands and ran in without a second thought. The tear closed up and healed right after his entry, leaving no traces that the young demon had been there. Naruto's actions had doomed the shinobi world, and he had no regrets. He now goes to a new dimension, one where he would no longer have to associate with his past any longer. Goodbye. It was a surprisingly good day for Moka. Her morning had been restful, the blood she drank was incredibly fresh compared to the usual staleness, and as she had just entered the forest, a strangely cloaked person said that she was going to meet a very precious person today. Who would have thought high school could start off so great? The pink-haired girl hummed a happy tune as she rode her bike down the dirt path before her. She was feeling so incredibly good that moment that she was sure the cloaked person's little prediction would come true too. Everything else had gone well so far, why not have a dear friend to top it all off? It would have been the dearest of wishes fulfilled, one that she yearned for. Suddenly, as if something had read her thoughts, a huge tear appeared in front of her. Moka cried out in surprise, just as a blonde figure popped out and crashed into her. With the unexpected force against her, the young vampire lost her grip on the bike and the both of them fell off to the ground. Time seemed to have slowed, and the vampire instinctively closed her eyes in preparation for the impact to come. But at the same time, she felt arms circling around her body, and she was then pressed against a surprisingly warm and firm body. The impact came, but it was significantly dulled. She barely felt anything at all, though it took her a moment to piece together what had just happened. When she remembered, Moka realized that a person had popped out of nowhere and collided with her. That person had then caught her and held her in midair. Even after, she was still pressed comfortably against the body. Her eyes slowly opened when she felt that person's arms left their embrace from her body. She turned her gaze upwards, noting that this mystery person was indeed male from the feel of his chest and the toned muscles in his stomach. Their eyes met and all of a sudden, she was met with the most frightening pair of eyes she had ever seen. The two orbs that stared back were a deep shade of red, with slitted pupils not unlike those of a vampire. Yet the feel of this person was anything but. Something about him, something that only heightened senses such as a vampire could detect, gave off a feeling of great power, feral and extremely potent. Yet even then, it was perfectly held in control and almost hidden away completely. It intrigued as much as it frightened her. Though she wasn't the type to boast, Moka acknowledged that her race, the vampires, were considered as the elites amongst monsters. Very few were considered an equal, and next to none were considered a superior. Yet all of her vampiric senses were warning her. This person wasn't just superior compared to her, he was even more powerful than her father, an ancient vampire lord. This information was a great shock to her. The girl could only continue to stare up at this mysterious figure in sheer disbelief. Though even in this state, she noted that he was extremely handsome. For a while, neither of them said anything. The silence was almost unnerving, though Moka took no notice of this. She was still entranced by this seemingly godly figure. A stray thought then entered her mind that this guy wasn't just handsome, he was practically drool-worthy. Suddenly, the stranger shifted, catching her by surprise. Damn, you're certainly a bold, naughty girl. A guy can definitely get used to this. Eh? She had been caught up in his gruff, informal tone. But then, his words returned and she looked down to herself. Moka's face immediately colored at just how provocative she looked, lying on top of him with one leg up, as if to wrap around his waist. Her body was pressed against him with her hands placed on his chest. Lastly, the front of her school coat and blouse were parted. Though it's so that a rosary wouldn't be pressed so uncomfortably against her skin, it certainly looked very different in the eyes of anyone else. The vampire E10 hastily got off of the male before her. Her face burned with embarrassment. The stranger got up and dusted himself, making a good display of the toned muscles under his shirt. Despite herself, Moka began eyeing this guy who suddenly showed up from thin air. He was incredibly good-looking, with an unmarred, almost aristocratic dominant feature. His blonde hair was long and messy, with the back reaching below his shoulders and tied into 3 separate locks. It gave his appearance a good mix between the refined features of his face and the feral undertone of those eyes and length of hair. From what the blonde was wearing, Moka would not have suspected him to have looked incredibly strong. Sure, he had a lean build, but with the bagginess of those pants and thermos, it looked like he was simply skinny. If she had not felt those muscles underneath, she would not have thought him to have been incredibly powerful. Moka had an inkling that this misleading appearance was done on purpose as she watched the blonde went and flexed his wrists experimentally. Man, I wasn't expecting to pop up and get smashed by someone. He sighed and cracked his neck rather loudly. Damn, that hurt. She blushed and instinctively began an apology. Sorry. You just appeared out of nowhere and I. Yet before Moka could finish, a glint of red caught her eyes. It shone like a jewel in the sunlight, reflecting a crimson glow that her entire being instinctively knew. Blood. The stranger was bleeding from some unseen wound on the neck. Entranced, she could only stare at the crimson liquid as it flowed out. Her body and mind became completely enthralled by the life-giving fluid glinting like jewelry in the sun. Then, before she knew it, the vampire was pressing herself against him once more. Her hands moved up to gently lie against his chest, and she stood up on tiptoes, bringing her face closer and closer to his neck. The scent of blood became overpowering and her need to feed awoke. Moka's green eyes flared and slitted for a moment as she went and licked the blood from the stranger's neck. Pure ecstasy flooded her nerves. The blood that she tasted was delicious for a monster, almost human in its sheer richness and texture. Yet at the same time, there was an underlying tone of feral power that flooded her body and pleasure. It was scary at just the volume of power in this blood, having left its source in the body. Yet it was incredible at how good it felt. She could only imagine, through that fog of pleasure, just how amazing if the blood was still in the body. In this pleasure, Moka went and licked away all the blood, yet strangely enough, she found no wound from him. Odd, where did the blood come from then? You know, if you want to take this to some room, I'd be happy to oblige. Suddenly, her reason kicked in and her eyes widened in absolute horror. Moka gave a shriek and practically jumped away from the blonde. Sorry. It's just that your blood smelled so good, almost like a human, that I just couldn't control myself. It was so completely mortifying to have lost control like that. What did the guy before her think of her now? When she had enough courage, Moka turned her eyes upwards and met his gaze. The blonde looked completely amused, and that only inflamed her embarrassment all that faster. The blonde grinned and introduced himself. My name's Uzumaki Naruto. You wouldn't happen to know just where the hell am I, would you? You're in the campus of Yokai Academy. Ah, I'm Akashi Moka, a vampire. Pleasure to meet you. Hershey smiled shyly. And sorry about licking your blood like that. I just couldn't control myself. He waved off her apology but did look interested at the location. Yokai Academy. Safe to say that there are no humans that attend it. Definitely not. Humans are supposed to be killed immediately if they are discovered here. How interesting. Mind if I join too? That surprised her. But she supposed it shouldn't. He did appear out of nowhere and wasn't wearing the uniform. That reminded her. Oh. Where did you come from? I've never heard of an Akashi that doesn't know Yokai Academy. The blonde merely smirked and took out a pair of sunglasses from his pant pockets. Moka watched as he flipped it open and placed it over the red eyes that surprised her so. Secret? He teased. But attending school might be a nice and relaxing experience. When does it start anyways? It was then that Moka realized it. Oh no. We're going to be late for the ceremony. Is the school that building all the way over there away from the forest? Yes, but it doesn't matter because we'll be la. Before Moka could finish, there was a whirl of wind and someone suddenly picked her up bridal style. There was just a brief moment in which she wondered what would happen to her bike, not that it mattered. Those bikes crash a bit too much anyways. If they had stayed there a bit longer, they would have noticed a scared as hell human walking down the path with great apprehension as to just what he had gotten himself into. Naruto found that getting accepted into the school of monsters was ridiculously easy. The chairman had been away on some stupid errand, so it was the vice chairman, a pushover, that was deciding whether or not to accept him into the school. All he had to do was to mess him around with a well-placed ninjutsu, and the sniveling old man would have gladly jumped off the school building stark naked if he had asked. Still, it felt a bit confining to be inside the stupid school uniform. The blonde gave a disgusted look as he went and tugged at the collar. It felt as if someone was about to strangle him with how close the collar was to his neck. Honestly, how do people get used to this? Now what class was it again? He checked a little paper note while pulling his tie loose. 2A. It was strange experience to be inside this school. In his world, no real shinobi would have stayed in school much longer than their 6th year. After that, it was the private tutoring from their respective jonin commanders. Yet it appears as if in this world, there are no such thing as shinobis and ninjas. It would seem that the sole purpose of these schools are simple enrichment classes to prepare them for living as humans. At that, Naruto could only snort. He had learned to live as a human out of necessity, but now, he had a distinct pride in having abandoned his humanity. It was just his luck to appear in a human-dominated world. He'll worry about that when he gets there. The blonde still had to go and find the class. SE, 2A. Naruto-san. Naruto-san, is that you? Surprised, the blonde turned around to see the now familiar pink hair and almost innocent green eyes. It was the same girl that he had crashed into just a moment ago. He smiled and nodded. Well, pleasure to meet you again, Moka-san. With a final tug, he opened up his collar and slackened his tie. Like what you see. The vampire blushed and looked away. You broke my heart. Am I that ugly? That's not it. Moka's blush only deepened as she attempted to stutter out an explanation. But her words died the moment she felt a finger pressed against her lips. Naruto grinned and winked at her. Thanks. So long as I know I'm an eye candy, I'm good. Seeing as how they weren't getting anywhere, the blonde decided to change the subject. So it seems getting accepted into this school was way easier than I thought. Now, what class are you in? I might be able to walk you along the way. Moka's eyes widened in realization. Congratulations, Naruto-san. My class is 2, but I think I'm late already. It's alright. I'm late too. And what do you know, we're in the same class. That had her attention. Moka's eyes brightened and her expression screamed really. The blonde merely nodded in motion for her to follow. It wouldn't do to be completely late after all. The trip wasn't as long he thought. In fact, room 2 was just around the corner. Yet Moka had made it quite clear that she got lost trying to find the classroom. Perhaps the school was a bit larger than he thought. Naruto stopped in front of the door and slid it open. Immediately, the two found themselves the object of attention to everyone in the classroom. The person standing closest to them, who he suspects to be the teacher, perked up at their direction. Oh? More students. Moka immediately bowed in front of the teacher. I'm very sorry that I'm late. I got lost trying to get here. Oh, that's alright. And you? Naruto thought of telling the truth for a moment when a bout of inspiration struck him. The blonde grinned and adjusted his glasses. Sorry, sensei. I was making my way to the classroom when there was this black cat walking down the hallway. I didn't want to get bad luck, so I went and did a whole circle around campus before I made it back here. Silence followed his words, and Naruto had a distinct feeling that everyone had just sweat-dropped, Moka included. Heh. That was probably the only thing he enjoyed about Kakashi-sensei, the ability to make everyone think you're an idiot or suicidal. But to everyone's complete shock, the teacher smiled and nodded. Yes. I do that quite a lot too. Those black cats are the worst bullies you can ever know. He didn't know what to make of it, but merely settled for a nod. Meanwhile, the teacher pointed at a pair of seats. I believe those 2 seats are available right now. Take your seats please. Both Naruto and Moka nodded. Along the way, mutterings broke out from the entire classroom. Guys were making lewd comments left and right while laying the pink-haired vampire. The murmurs weren't very quiet and Naruto had to arch an eyebrow at how blatant their lust were when directed at her. It was a wonder that Moka was able to ignore them so well. At the same time, there was quite a bit of anger directed at him. Seems like how at ease Moka had been in his presence has already labeled him as an obstacle to her affections. So when the guys would frown and stare at the pink-haired beauty, their gazes would turn to outright glares when they turned to him. Naruto had bore through much worse than those before, so they never affected him. It seemed as if Moka had definitely noticed those glares. When they took their seats, the vampire cast a worried glance in his direction. Naruto merely met her eyes and shook his head with a grin. She looked doubtful but refrained from voicing it. Now, as I was saying, we as Ayakashi are to learn how to blend in into human society. The fact is just that the world is dominated by humans. If we are to survive, we must learn to coexist with them. Coexist? If humans were to learn of the existence of monsters, the first thing in their mind would be outright extermination. Coexisting would not be a peaceful concept until after hundreds of years of persecution. That being said, this school is purely for the Ayakashi. If humans were to enter, they are supposed to be killed on sight so as to continue our secrecy. At those words, a brown-haired boy with very nondescript features jumped in his seat and began shaking. It wasn't very noticeable to many, but Naruto had noticed. The blonde narrowed his eyes, and a feral smile made its way to his features. Naruto raised his hand, bringing the sensei's attention to him. So it's possible for humans to enter this place. Oh no. This realm is protected by a powerful barrier that makes it invisible to all humans and their technologies. The only way for humans to enter this realm are to go through the tunnel, and that is impossible unless they were accepted into the school. Again, the human began shaking. He turned and met Naruto's eyes, to which the blonde gave a rather cruel smile too. The brunette quickly looked away, but he already knew that his secret was out. In a bout of inspiration, the blonde went and performed a simple ram seal. Thanks to the assimilation of the Kyuubi, he became a literal library of ancient abilities and a master of illusions and mind control. Performing Jinjutsu was but a simple hand seal. Naruto's eyes were trained on the trembling human as his poured almost invisible strand of Yauki, where no one but the highest in sensing could detect, into the human. The boy stiffened as his mind-altering kicked in and relaxed a second later. The blonde could only grin. Did that boy think he could just escape? He was here and he was going to stay here. Naruto was interested in just what will happen to him, staying in a school of monsters that won't hesitate to kill him. Satisfied with this, Naruto relaxed and returned his attention to the class. School was boring but peaceful, even for one that teaches Ayakashi exclusively. For Naruto, who had a wealth of knowledge thanks to his assimilating of the Kyuubi, knew practically everything that could be taught in terms of language, science, and mathematics. And if there were anything that he didn't know, then Naruto's natural talent of picking things up quickly would more than make up for it. The blonde stretched and gave a pleasant sigh as he got up from his seat. Honestly, he hadn't been so relaxed in a long time. It was very restful to be in this world, yet there is that slight edge of danger that he enjoyed. It was perfect for him. Naruto-san. He saw Moka standing before him, smiling rather beautifully. Honestly, the pink hair and green eyes would have immediately been a turnoff after suffering 9 years of Haruno Sakura, but Moka had absolute beauty, something that the overbearing girl of his past lacked. The pink hair and green eyes were the only similarities, and truthfully, neither of the two were even the same shades. "Naruto-san, are you there?" He blinked at seeing a hand waving in front of his face. Moka was looking at him with wide innocent eyes, to which he wondered if a vampire should actually possess. Nonetheless, he grinned and replied. "Sorry, I was just enjoying the magnificent view from up here." Her eyes followed his gaze and down to chest, where the top of her chest and the very hint of her friezes were visible. Moka's face immediately heated up and her hand shot up to cover it, while giving him a pouting glare. Naruto laughed and once again, noted at the angry and jealous stares aimed at his direction. Honestly, was there no one that's a man of action? If they're pissed, they should go outright and confront him, not stand there and mutter like an idiot. It seemed that Naruto was a bit early as a burly student with the stereotypical face of a tough guy wannabe, sauntered up to the two of them. "You're Akashi Moka, right? The name's Saizu Kamiya." After he made his way towards the two of them, he grabbed Naruto by his collar and lifted him up. But his attention was directed solely towards the vampire before him. "I have to know, why are you talking to a puny guy like him?" Naruto heard the whispers going about, depicting this person as generally bad news. He snorted internally. Annoyance, maybe, but bad news. Hardly. Even from his position, being picked up like this, he remained completely relaxed and composed, something that everyone in the room aside from Saizu noted. "How about the two of us ditch this guy and go have some fun, eh?" The meaning behind his words were quite clear, and Naruto had to grimace at how blatant his intentions were. Deciding that enough was enough, the blonde gripped bigger male's wrist and nearly crushed it under his force. Saizu's eyes widened in pain and he yelled out as he dropped him. Naruto landed, perfectly at ease, while the bigger guy was almost howling and cradling his hand against him. "You bastard." Saizu got up and lunged at him with his fist clenched tightly. Yet Naruto merely sidestepped him and kicked him in the back, sending the meathead tumbling towards the wall. Silence followed that action. Everyone was surprised that someone like Naruto, who looked scrawny compared to Saizu, had so easily sent the muscled student tumbling. It was practically unheard of to everyone there. Only Moka, who had felt the power and muscle under that seemingly scrawny figure, knew that Naruto wasn't just strong in terms of Yaki, but could definitely hold his own in a physical fight as well. Yet at the same time, the vampire frowned when she heard some of the whispers and giggling from the female students. It appears that Naruto's image, with the glasses, open collar and slack tie, was a turn-on for them, and Saizu's utter humiliation only added to that image. Of course, Moka liked that image as well, but she was feeling just a bit jealous that she no longer had that short-lived monopoly in knowing him. The vampire could only guess as to how fast news would travel and at how quickly females will begin looking at him with interest. Meanwhile, Saizu was slowly picking himself up, his face burning with humiliation and anger. Naruto merely stood still, his bored eyes hidden beneath those glasses. "You bastard," Saizu grounded out. "You think you're tough shit, huh? Well, I'm going to beat the crap out of you now and then I'll have my fun with." "Sorry." Moka's sudden outburst surprised everyone. Yet their eyes nearly bugged out when she latched her arms around Naruto's and began tugging him out of the classroom. Naruto merely looked amused, having guessed that she would do something like this. "I'm having fun with Naruto right now." At that, the blonde laughed as the two of them left the class, leaving everyone gawking at them and Saizu's face now burning with rejection as well. Outside, Naruto was walking with Moka besides him. The two had already generated a great deal of attention, with both being the object of affection from their respective sex. Yet neither noticed as they simply walked out to the fresh air. "So, was it true?" Moka looked up at the question, confusion evident. Naruto grinned in response. "You said you were having fun with me." In everyone's mind, that's quite an erotic undertone. "You having fun with me?" Her face heated up once more, yet at the same time, her eyes widened in horror at what she had said. "Well, it's not like I have a problem with that." Naruto grinned at her, sputtering. "In fact, I would enjoy having fun with you too." It was amusing, really. Moka was like Hinata out how easy it is to tease her. Perhaps she was intimidated by his presence as well, which led her to acting even more like the girl from his recent past. It was something that he found himself enjoying, feeling just a hint of nostalgia as her face and Hinata's mixed. But he decided to take pity and refrain from continuing the teasing, much to the vampire's gratefulness. Instead, he asked out a question that caught her completely by surprise. "What do you think of humans if they were in this school?" Moka's face immediately went still, hinting that her mind became conflicted at her answer. She hesitated, but Naruto waited patiently. It wasn't like he was in a hurry to know. Finally, the pink-haired beauty heaved a sigh and gave her answer to him. I wouldn't want to kill them if I can help it. But I just hate humans." Naruto arched an eyebrow and made a gesture for her to elaborate. When I was younger, I was in a human public school. Being there, I was ridiculed constantly for believing that I was a vampire and drinking tomato juice. It was a terrible place to be in and I began hating humans so fast. I don't want to coexist with humans. If possible, I want there to be a realm permanently made for Akashi. Then, I wouldn't have to worry about trying to blend in ever again. Her story almost paralleled with his own, though it was severely downplayed. His treatment by humans was much more cruel, but it basically amounted to the same thing. Naruto also desired to have a realm of kindred beings that did not mind him being what he was. You know, I was once human. Moka stopped completely upon hearing those words. Her face became pale and her eyes were wide with horror. Naruto stood quietly as the words registered in her mind, his face the very essence of calm. He was actually expecting her to run, but it was a show of character when she instead turned her gaze up towards him, asking him to continue. Naruto nodded, feeling glad at her reaction. He was also thankful at having milked the vice chairman for all he knew on Akashi lore. I too was once treated with ridicule because I became the object of fear for my home. The humans basically labeled me as the scourge of their lives and saw fit to treat me worse than dirt. The earliest memory I had was of them throwing stones at me. I couldn't have been more than 4 years old back then. Moka's horror changed from fear of him to fear for him. It was endearing to see her trying to wrap her mind around the human's capacity for cruelty. Naturally, I began seeking an answer as to why I was treated that way. It came, but it was not what I had been expecting. They treated me as a monster because I was born on a day that the monster supposedly died in. It's a stupid reason, I know, but they somehow warped their thoughts until I became the monster incarnate. Naruto gave a bitter smile. And after, my anger and hatred grew, festering until I came across a true monster. It would have consumed me entirely if it wasn't for my anger and hatred. She looked confused, so he decided to elaborate. Are you familiar with Japanese lore regarding human emotions? Moka shook her head. I know a bit but not much. It's simple, really. Humans also have the ability to become Akashi, though it requires a great deal of hatred, anger, and sorrow. I had it all, and when that demon came to consume me, I ate it instead. I took on the form, ability, and name of that demon. And when I came out, I massacred my entire town in retribution for their sins. She had not been expecting that at all. Naruto, who was this relaxed and slightly perverted person, had actually massacred people before. She couldn't see his eyes, but she somehow knew that he was telling the truth. In a way, it only reinforced her notion at just how evil humans could truly be. Naruto-san, I'm sorry for you. She was surprised to find tears reflexively welling up. She could only imagine a young boy wondering just what he had done when a mob came to beat him to a pulp. His past with humans made hers seem like a minor annoyance in comparison. What are you sorry for? It's not like you did anything to me back then. But it's just that my past seems so minor compared to yours that I. Before she could finish, Naruto once in front of her and flicked her nose. She flinched and clutched her nose, but Naruto merely grinned and shook his head. No past with human cruelty is considered minor, Moka-chan. Naruto-san. And please, simply call me Naruto. You're being way too formal. Moka blushed but smiled at him, grateful that he chose to lighten the mood. She was already feeling her warmth for him growing in volume the longer she was in his presence. It seemed to be an innate ability to make her feel so at ease. But if you decide to become mine and call me Naruto-sama, then I won't stop you. Her eyes widened and she shoved him harshly. Pervert. For Naruto, who was on the receiving end of that shove, it felt as if someone had launched him with a miniature Kamitachi. The blonde quickly righted himself, though the force of her shove was evident at the dirt path his feet had dug in. Note to self. Don't piss her off too much. There was another thing similar to Sakura right there. Freakish strength. But the blonde grinned and continued walking as if nothing had happened. As they continued their relatively peaceful walk in exploring the campus, it was Naruto who made a few lecherous jabs here and there, embarrassing but secretly pleasing the vampire more and more as they continued on. The next day came at a leisure pace for Naruto. Yet it was to be the first day of some actual teaching. A part of him became curious with the curriculum in general, though most of him was just thinking to relax some more. He was still in a process of unwinding, and it showed when he nearly dismembered a doormate when he decided to prank him in the showers. Naruto grinned. At the very least, that guy wouldn't be pranking him anytime soon. Hey, jackass. He recognized that tone immediately and once again, Naruto became amused. He turned his eyes to the guy before him. Saizu was right there, leaning against a tree and scowling at him heatedly. You mean me? Naruto's attempt at being innocent only infuriated the larger student, and it showed when he lunged at him. Deciding to take pity on the much larger student, the blonde allowed himself to be picked up once again. You must have been enjoying Moka the entire day, huh? Think you can just come and humiliate me while taking my girl as well? Saizu's attempted intimidation was pitiful in his opinion, and it showed in how absolutely bored he looked. And it pisses me off to even think that happened. So why don't you quit tucking around and tell me just what monster are you? Naruto smirked at with shake of his head, lowered his sunglasses just enough to reveal those burning slitted eyes. Surprised, the hulking student dropped him and backed off. No way, Naruto heard Saizu mutter as he picked himself up. There's no way that you're a vampire. He adjusted his glasses and grinned. Think what you will. But if you don't hurry, you'll be late for class. There was no response from Saizu and frankly, he didn't care. Naruto merely hefted the book bag onto his shoulder and continued walking down the path to school. He didn't notice that as the school got closer and closer, Naruto could make out the strange, completely foreign design on its buildings. He frowned at how the building was made to resemble those Victorian castles that he had read about. Really, whoever the headmaster or architect had been, they had a rather terrible sense of style. The building looked gaudy and generally, like a piece of shit. Must have been a era thing. He muttered. Naruto sighed and leaned against a tree where he was supposed to be meeting Moka. After a generally good time together walking around campus, they had agreed to meet up so they could walk to class together in the morning. So there he was, waiting for her. Seconds ticked by. Then minutes. And Naruto's experience decoded that as a very bad thing. Evidently, he did not see that punk, Saizu, walking past him either. It didn't take much to piece together what might have happened, especially after the day before, and Naruto gave a quiet curse. The blonde hunched low before disappearing in a flash. His speed, honed from years of training and assimilating Yaki, had him moving with incredible speed. At the same time, he traced the scent of that brute and began following it. Once he got closer and closer to the girls' dormitory, that scent mixed with Moka's. Naruto's eyes flared and he made it just in time, near a pond by the school. There, the pinned form of Akashia Moka was screaming while Saizu, or what appeared to be him, was looming over her. Both turned their attentions towards him, and both noted that despite his seemingly calm expression, there was a frightening chill that descended onto them, as if he could simply go and tear off their limbs in a heartbeat. Saizu, now in his true form, straightened up to confront this new threat, but evidently, it was much too great for him. In a moment too fast to see, Naruto was already in front of him, and before he could do anything, the blonde had seemingly backhanded him with little care. Yet that backhand had enough strength to send him tumbling into the pond. Without that nuisance in the way, Naruto knelt down in front of the shaking vampire, absently noted that despite her torn clothes, she wasn't raped. "You alright?" At his question, Moka jumped and held on to him, still shaking terribly from her ordeal. Naruto merely held on to her, and his Yaki receded back under control as he held her steady in his arms. "It's okay." Naruto held her, murmuring in a soothing tone. "It's alright, I'm here now. You're going to be okay." It would have made a very endearing picture, Naruto mused, if it wasn't for Saizu getting up and ruining it all. The hulking true form of the brute slowly staggered up from the pond and it became clear that the guy was pissed. He was angry enough where the rage had clouded his judgment and without the previous flood of Yaki that had surrounded him, Naruto didn't seem as powerful in his now almost feral mind. The blonde considered fighting the ogre again, but as he began to gather Yaki again, a brief spark of electricity had both him and Moka spring apart. Their eyes fell onto the rosario that was hanging from her choker, crackling with red lightning. It suddenly fell into place, and Naruto couldn't help but shake his head. Realizing what the silver cross was, he had his Yaki dissipate to a very minute level before reaching and grasping the artifact. It reacted once more, a testament to its ability to detect Yaki, but it was no longer a spark like before. Naruto grinned and winked at the vampire before him, before tugging at the artifact. The chains held for just a brief moment before it snapped. Moka stared at it, then at him, then back to the artifact, before her eyes glazed over. Suddenly, the whole area was flooded with power. Naruto arched an eyebrow, impressed with the volume as it saturated everything. From where he was, Saizu felt as if ice had suddenly gripped his being, and the rage from before changed into fear. The great amount of Yaki surrounding Moka took on the shapes of bats. The creatures all surrounded her almost unconscious form, returning back to their host and empowering her with the strength of her race. Finally, when it all ended, Naruto found himself in the presence of a fully powered, unsealed vampire. Her power was impressive, evident with a red haze that descended onto the pond. Yet it was the change of her features and demeanor that had him more interested. Moka's pink hair, which had been a vibrant color, paled to an almost silvery tint. Her chest was a bit larger and her hips more pronounced. The vampire now no longer held herself in the same manner as before. Instead, she had a distinct air of aristocracy and the arrogance that goes with it. When she opened her eyes, they were red and slitted, much like his own. So this was the true power of a vampire, perceived to be an S-class being, an elite amongst elites. Naruto could see why and frankly, he was impressed. To think that there would be someone who had the power equivalent to perhaps a high-level jonin from his own realm was something to be very proud of, especially in a world where the average abilities of a monster is only mid to low chunin. This new Moka had none of the innocence that the one he knew possessed. There was clear arrogance and pride in her eyes, and they seemed much more jaded than her counterparts. Yet there was distinct softness there that was the same. Naruto smiled at this. Despite the change in form and perhaps personality, she was still Akashiya Moka. Upon seeing his smile, Moka nodded to him. I must say, it is very surprising that a being as powerful as you would be able to pull off the rosary. Her voice was deeper, more sultry and seductive compared to the soft tone from before. It would seem that your story as being human before was true. Only a human or very weak Akashi would have been able to pull off the rosary. Naruto got up and dusted himself. Or one that can control the flow of energy with great precision. True, very true. And that brings me to my question. What are you? Moka's eyes were narrowed in clear suspicion. I know for a fact that I, as a member of the elite vampires, would be no match for you. Even my father, a vampire lord of the highest class, would be but a fly in your eyes. What type of monster could you possibly be to overpower even an ancient vampire lord? The blonde smiled. Now that his glasses were gone, Moka saw the shift that his eyes went through. Before, they were red and slitted, much like a vampire. But then all of a sudden, the red became blue, and 4 individual diagonal lines appeared in a circle around the slits. Seeing her reaction, Naruto's smile turned to one of amusement. That, my dear, is for another time. For now, busy yourself with that little shit over there. I want to see what a vampire can do. Moka's attention returned to Saizu, who had made his way back to the shore. The ogre was hunched over and growling at the two of them, brandishing his enormous claws at their direction. What's the matter, ogre? Moka walked away from Naruto and towards the large monster. From where he was, Naruto was able to appreciate the swing of her hips. The slight flare of her yaki told him that she noticed his stares. You were so intent on taking advantage of me, proclaiming that you are so strong that I should be grateful that you even chose me. Her eyes gleamed with intent and she smiled. Well then. Come and take me if you can. Saizu responded immediately. The large ogre lumbered towards her, roaring out and raising his large claws. Yet he didn't even make it to her. Instead, Moka had rushed over to him and jumped up until she was right in front of his face. Seeing the brute's stupefied expression, the vampire smiled coldly. Know your place. The crack resounded in the air from the force of Moka's kick. Saizu's whole form was lifted and sent colliding into the cliffs at the side. Naruto watched it all and clapped at her demonstration. Clearly, his evaluation was spot on. Moka, the vampire, definitely had the skills of a high jonin, but no greater. A cage, even one as weak as Tsunade, would have been able to bring her down with relative ease. The vampire walked over to him, never stopping the sway of her hips. Naruto continued gazing at those hips and legs until Moka's voice, surprisingly close, whispered into his ear. My eyes are up here. I know. Naruto grinned and ducked from a head kick. Laughing, the blonde backed up a bit and held up his hands in surrender. Seeing this, Moka huffed at the strangeness of it all. You are a being of immense power. Yet you surrender to me? To that, Naruto had an easy answer. It is because I am so much more powerful that I can afford to surrender to you. If perhaps you were much more powerful than this father of yours, I might be more inclined to put up a fight. Moka seemed to have accepted that logic, which confounded him. Normally, people would take that as a direct insult to their strength. Yet Moka took it as if it were a fact, which it was. Must be a vampire/aristocrat thing. He muttered quietly. Thankfully, she did not hear, or if she did, Moka chose to ignore it. Instead, she lightly took the rosary from his hands and gave him a smile. As vampires, we are a proud race that desire strength and prestige above all else. Therefore, we often choose only the strongest of suitors as our mates. She leaned forward and bit into him, lightly sucking on Naruto's blood. It was only for a few seconds, but when she pulled away, Moka had the amazing satiated expression one would compare to a very successful and tiring lovemaking. She gave him a sultry smile as she held the rosary over her chest. So as a member of that proud race, I think it would be amazing if I were to mate with you. Naruto stared, speechless as the vampire placed her artifact on. With the rosary back on, her powers literally receded back in, and with it, her features returned back to the Moka that he was used to. The red haze disappeared and her eyes returned back to their vibrant green. The Moka now, however, still had that very satiated smile on her face and her eyes were glazed. Yet before Naruto could make a lewd comment about it, her eyes closed and she fell into his arms. The blonde watched her sleeping quietly in his arms, with a content smile on her face, in silence. The words of her other self echoed in his mind. Mate. That was certainly a strange and rather abrupt thing to get into. Yet he wasn't against that idea at all. Hell, Naruto was quite interested in that idea. But was that from that Moka or this one? Naruto-sama more. Well, that answered that. Naruto shook his head and gathered her into his arms. He then stood up and held her bridal style, to which she snuggled into a very comfortable position. The blonde chuckled and turned to head back to the school. He might have chosen the right place to appear after all. Having a mate at 15 and to a very hot partner. It was practically every hormonally charged teenager's dream. Shinobis die quickly anyways, so it was expected for young marriages. It was nothing new to him, but glancing down at the sleeping vampire, who murmured his name almost lovingly in her sleep, Naruto suddenly became much more intrigued with it. Naruto yawned and scratched his head sleepily as he made his way to school. A good part of him had simply wanted to sleep the day away. Last night after his encounter with Moka's other self, Naruto had an amazing dream. It involved a naked Moka, a nice set of ropes, and a blindfold. Just the thought of feeling her soft naked body pressed against him, having her moan out his name in delicious need and agony was enough to have him ready to go back and fall asleep again. But he had an obligation to go to school, and even if he didn't want to, discipline that had been drilled into him as a shinobi would have forced him to attend anyways. Except Naruto wanted to go. The school, despite its eccentricity, held the promise to more knowledge. And if there is one thing that Naruto learned to appreciate from his past, it was finding out that knowledge was power. As he continued along the path, Naruto noted that practically all the guys up front were staring at someone. When he got closer, he realized that all the guys were staring at a blue-haired girl walking to school, purposely swaying her hips and most likely wearing a shorter skirt size than deemed appropriate. He arched an eyebrow at that. The girl was definitely a beauty, with soft-looking blue hair that framed a youthful face. Her waist was quite narrow, but the hips and subsequently her butt were well-shaped. It then led down to a pair of fine, unblemished long legs. But anyone with an eye could see that her biggest assets were literally her wrists. They were abnormally large for any natural girl, leading Naruto to wonder if she had something done to them. It seemed that most guys were staring at those wrists and were trailing after her like zombies. From the way she smirked at them, it was obvious that she knew this and was basking in their lust for her. Naruto held no lust for her. He wasn't a wrist guy. Sure, he doesn't like flat chests, but having melons like those weren't exactly a turn-on for him either. And since those wrists seemed to be her biggest winning factor, he would probably never win over to her. But he noticed that someone else had. The blonde arched an eyebrow when the human from before, Aono Tsukyun if he remembered correctly, was staring as the blue-haired buxom walked closer and closer. When she got close enough, she stuck out a finger and trailed it along his chin before winking at him, causing the human to go beet red. Naruto snorted and continued walking. It was almost disgusting at how weak he was. Maybe it wasn't such a good idea to have forced him to stay. He would have gagged at the pure look of enslavement that was on that idiot's face. It was a few ways up the path that once again, there were stairs. Yet this time, Naruto recognized who the person was and he immediately made his way over with a grin. "Morning Moka-chan." Her head snapped away from wherever she was staring, as if she had been lost in thought. Although he had seen her blush numerous times from the 2 days before, Naruto had to arch an eyebrow at how quickly her face turned red, especially when he didn't even make any comments yet. But before he could comment on it, she went and bowed to him. Naruto just stared, surprised at just what she was doing. "I'm so sorry." She apologized. "I don't know why I said that. Please believe me." Now that was strange. Just what the hell was she talking about? Naruto, upon hearing that, answered in the most intelligent way possible. "Huh?" Moka's face burned with embarrassment and she began mumbling. But the words were so softly spoken that even Naruto couldn't make heads or tails of what she was trying to say. He went closer and cupped his ear. "Say that again." "I meant about yesterday." Naruto winced at the sudden increase in volume and backed up immediately. "Yesterday, I asked you to too." "Ah." Naruto then realized just what she was trying to say. Interesting enough, he was surprised that Moka was able to remember that at all. The other Moka's personality made him think that their memories and experiences would be separate. Yet it seems that it was not completely true. It appeared to him that even though she was in another personality, she was still able to retain pieces of memories relating to past events. The blonde grinned at this. "Well, it was the other you, correct?" "Why yes, good. At least she was able to realize that she was evidently split into 2 people. Then there's no problem. The only one who sees me desirable is her and..." "That's not true." Moka's outburst caused everyone around to grow silent. It was almost eerie at how quiet everyone suddenly became. When she noticed this, the vampire quickly lowered her voice. "There are many girls in the school who like you. And even if it's the other me, I also..." "Well, that settles it then." Naruto's smile told her that she had just been played. "If you like me as well, then there's no problem. But we've only known each other for a day. Maybe when more time has passed I'll take you as a mate." His words had her blushing in a mixture of pleasure and embarrassment. It was incredibly pleasing that he would accept her as a mate. For Moka, there was a great attraction to him simply on a primitive level in regards to the power that she could feel. It also didn't hurt that he was incredibly handsome as well. Yet at the same time, the more carnal undertones of being a mate and his rather blunt way of saying it had her feeling more than a little flushed. Simply the word mate was enough to cause a number of scenes to manifest in her mind, some less innocent than the others. Suddenly, there came a hand that went and flicked her forehead. Moka winced and backed up, clutching where she had been struck. Ow. Come on, airhead. You can fantasize about any honeymoon later. Right now, school's important. She flushed at how easily he read her and was about to retort when Naruto then grabbed her shoulders and gently began pushing her towards the school. When she looked up, Moka was met with his amused grin and those red eyes, barely visible under his sunglasses. The vampire shivered upon seeing those eyes. But instead of fear, she felt a sense of thrill in having those eyes focused solely on her. There was just this instinctive excitement at the promise of being enthralled by such a great vessel of power. It was such an excitement that she found herself actually shaking with each step. Boy. She blinked when Naruto's fist gently rapped on her head. You feeling alright? Sorry. Moka quickly searched for an excuse. It just so happened that she remembered she didn't have any breakfast. I'm just a bit hungry right now so I'm not thinking straight. What, no breakfast? I kind of was in a hurry. Naruto arched an eyebrow at this. Then, to Moka's surprise, he went and stretched his neck. Well, you could have just told me. You like the taste of my blood, right? Go on then. I won't stop you. EA? Moka stared at his neck and barely even noticed when Naruto stopped the both of them so that he could lean against a nearby tree. Is it really alright for me? Well, normally I'd say no, but since you're a vampire, Naruto grinned and motioned her over. Oh, thank you. Moka immediately walked up to him until their bodies were touching. She reached up and gently pressed her hands onto his chest as she stood up on tiptoes, holding her face just above his veins, where the pulsing of his blood reached her ears. Being that close also allowed Moka to better feel the potency of his yaki. It called to her, coaxed her own latent energies, and had temporarily slitted her eyes without her knowledge. Moka, now feeling lightheaded from the yaki, sighed and opened her mouth. Her fangs immediately lengthened, and with a quiet-eyed Akamatsu, she bit in. Papuchu. She absently noted that Naruto had placed a hand on the back of her waist, gently pressing her more closely to him. It helped and she could now focus safely on enjoying her meal instead of worrying about her footing. And it was an incredible meal. The blood from before was but a tease compared to what she was feeding on now. In terms of torture, there was an incredible rich thickness that comes from a strong body. It was a far cry from the cold, preserved blood in those bags. For taste, it was a rare and perfect blend of all the right flavors, once again, a testament to his strong physique. But then, there came a rush of power that was almost staggering. One couldn't actually put into words at the flavor of this yaki, but its wild, feral nature added to the ambrosia that was Naruto's blood, enriching it with an almost exotic flavor not familiar but incredibly addicting. For his part, Naruto was enjoying the small perks in having Moka feed on him. Her sole attention was now focused solely on feeding, allowing him free rein to feel her body. Moka didn't even seem to notice when he was pretty much groping her. And for his part, Naruto found enough to reaffirm his suspicions. Moka had an amazing body. Lithe frame, well-shaped wrists, narrow waist, wide hips, round butt, and long smooth legs. Oh yeah, she's a catch all right. Healing her up also had the added benefits of making them seem like a couple making out. Naruto was already interested, despite what he told her. After nearly 12 years of loneliness, he would very much like to start a relationship. He just wanted to see what she was like a bit more though. So while he placed his hand over her, like a pair of very intimate lovers, Naruto was essentially telling everyone that she was taken. A group of guys walked past, all glaring at him. Naruto gave them a cheerful smile, causing them all to grumble amongst themselves. It was fun pissing them off. He looked down just as Moka pulled her fangs out. There was a minor sting, but it was nothing to him. In fact, any pain he might have felt was swept away by the pleasure in having the vampire gently licking at his puncture marks. It was an incredibly sensual move and if he wasn't sure about her innocence, Naruto would have thought that she was doing it to tempt him. Ah, that was so good. Moka looked up and met his gaze with glazed eyes. Naruto noted that she really did look like she had just come out finished having sex or something. That was how satiated she looked to him. I'm sorry. She pulled away slowly, as if with great reluctance, when her eyes began clearing up. Was it any trouble? Nah. Naruto grinned at a few more glaring passerbys. It actually felt good, almost therapeutic. Plus, there were a few extra perks when you were feeding too. Really? What were they? He winked at her as he began straightening up. That's for me to know and you to find out. Now come on. Class is going to start soon. He led her back onto the road and after making sure that she was steady on her feet, began walking her to school. Along the way, he absently noted that the blue-haired showgirl was glaring rather angrily at Moka. But he paid it little mind as he continued walking with her to school. Naruto-kun. The blonde cracked open an eye and looked down from his perch. Below, Moka was looking at him with a bag in her hands. "What are you doing up there?" He sighed and stretched, feeling content when several of his joints popped. "I was just resting." "Why? Did something come up?" "No, but you're resting. You didn't get anything to eat." "I'm not that hungry. I just grabbed an apple and had a drink of water." Moka looked down and began fingering the bag slowly. "I see." It really didn't take much to figure out why she looked so sad. In fact, he suspected as much the moment he saw the bag held within her grasp. Naruto easily rolled off of the branch and landed at the base of the trunk. "But if you want us to eat together, then it's alright with me." And just like that, Moka's eyes lit up. "Really?" "Yep." He sat down against a tree and patted on the spot next to him. "Just because I wasn't hungry doesn't mean there's no space in my stomach." Moka smiled and took her seat next to him. She crossed her legs and opened the bag, revealing a neat box inside. Seeing it, Naruto couldn't help but arch an eyebrow. He didn't expect her to make a bento, especially when she was still apologizing for whatever just that morning. Still, it wasn't an unwelcomed lunch. He was pleasantly amused when his nose picked up the delicious aroma of rice, fried shrimp, and broiled squid. And who said vampires can't cook? "I hope you like it." Moka smiled and held out the box to him. "I wanted to thank you for yesterday so I woke up early to make it." She neglected to say that she did a good job too if it smelled that good. Naruto stared at the box, a second away from taking a bite from that delicious meal, when he suddenly remembered something. "Wait a second." She looked up at him curiously. "You're saying that you remember everything from yesterday?" Moka looked even more confused but nodded. Seeing this, Naruto scratched his head in confusion. "Odd. I was under the impression that the rosary you carry would make everything hazy when you put it back on." "Now that you mention it," Moka mumbled quietly as realization dawned in her eyes. "This is the first time that I remembered everything so vividly. Any time that my rosary came off, it was like I blacked out completely." Don't tell me it's because you began drinking my blood." That may be true." She blushed and began fiddling with her uniform nervously. "The rosary was made for my level of Yaki. I don't know what might happen if someone like you were to suddenly flood it more than it could handle. There might be some consequences that I haven't thought of. So no drinking my blood anymore." Moka snapped her head up with such speed that Naruto had to wonder how the bones didn't crack. "No. There shouldn't be any really bad consequences. It's not like any more Yaki would turn me into something else. And besides, well, I think I might have become addicted to your blood." "Few sweat drop." Naruto sighed, but against her pleading expression, he relented. Alright. Shouldn't be that big of a problem. Now, about that bento." "Oh." Moka immediately held it out to him. "Sorry about that. Here you go." "I have a better idea." Naruto grinned, baring his own set of long fangs. "Feed me." When she heard that, Moka froze up. It took a moment for her mind to wrap around it. And even when it did, all she could say was a quiet "W what?" "Come on. It's not like it's a big deal, right? Think of it as payment for feeding on me." Naruto chuckled and leaned back to a more comfortable position. "Besides, I'm lazy. I'd rather starve to death than to get a good meal all by myself." "You wouldn't want this poor, starving guy to die, would you?" Despite herself, Moka had to giggle at the ridiculous pleading expression that was on Naruto's face. It made him look incredibly endearing and mischievous all at once. It was almost the same expression as a fox when it's about to steal a piece of chicken from a picnic. Okay. Moka smiled and opened up the box, confirming Naruto's suspicions. Inside was a very neat display of rice, 3 pieces of fried shrimp, and a cluster of tiny broiled squid. It was the type of lunch that guys would kill to get from a girl. Wow. Naruto was definitely amused now. "You know, if anyone walks in on us like this, they might get the impression that you're taken." It was funny to see how Moka's face turned red so fast. Yet surprisingly, she didn't stutter. Instead, she met his gaze, if a little shyly, and to his utter shock, smiled in return. "Good." Added Naruto, floored. Suddenly, his appreciation of her just soared. "Good?" Naruto grinned. "Are you hoping it to be true?" "Maybe." Again, there was that beginning of a flirtatious attitude. From the way she was smiling, Naruto had no doubt that Moka knew what she was doing. Well, maybes don't tell me much. They were hitting a fine line already. Ever since her other personality had made it known about her desire for becoming his mate, there was this air around them that suddenly changed from friends practically overnight. And right now, with her right next to him and getting closer, Naruto was already thinking of the choices laid out before him. On the one hand, he could defuse this before it gets a little too hot. There will be no doubt that frustration will come, but at the very least, their friendship should remain and it will allow him more time to get to know her before coming into a rash decision. On the other hand, he could let this go on and it would most likely lead to something that both of them would find very enjoyable. It will pave the way to intimacy and she will definitely become his girlfriend after, but then there runs the chance that such a relationship built in haste will end quickly as well. Could he handle something like that, especially when he has been emotionally wounded for a long time already? Ah, what the hell. Moka was already close enough and truthfully, Naruto wasn't all that worried about the eventual consequences. With their passes bearing a form of similarity, the prospect of a blossoming relationship more than outweigh any possible obstacles that could be in their way. With his mind made up, Naruto grabbed her and pulled her against him. Before Moka even knew what was happening, he already had a hand pressed against her waist. When she tilted her head up, she found herself caught in a full deep kiss. For a brief moment, Naruto was sure that he had been mistaken, that Moka was really just playing with him. It was a nerve-wracking moment that he felt might have just turned their entire situation into an awkward mess. But then, he felt her relax. Her hand slid up to rest against his chest and she made herself more comfortable. Then, Moka began kissing back and pretty soon after, Naruto stopped caring about everything besides her. He held her against him more tightly, actually lifting her legs and resting them on top of his own, and proceeded to kiss her senseless. For her part, Moka was genuinely surprised at Naruto's advance. She had been playing, true, but it had been more of a teasing type and she had wanted to try it out for herself. She did not expect him to suddenly pull her against him and kiss her without warning. It was incredibly strong and full of energy. It overwhelmed her and she had stiffened reflexively because of it. Her mind had completely frozen trying to piece together the fact that it was Naruto who suddenly began kissing her. But when she came to terms with this, Moka felt great pleasure running through her. She allowed herself to relax and settle into a more comfortable position with him. She even began returning his kisses, though she had zero experience, and felt genuinely good with herself when she felt his strong arms wrap around her. The bento box laid on the ground, forgotten by the two as they proceeded to kiss and hold each other, as if the world around them was falling. Moka gave out a soft sound of pleasure at Naruto's deep kiss. All of a sudden, she seemed so incredibly small compared to him, as if she was but a tiny creature in the face of an enormous beast. This feeling gave its fear, but it also thrilled her in a primitive level. Something ancient in her was excited at such a powerful being taking her as his own. When they finally parted lips, it was only because they had to catch their breaths. Moka was breathing heavily, panting and flushed in the face from their activity. While Moka breathed in when they parted, she felt lightheaded after the kiss, dazed at the fierceness that Naruto had put into it. That was amazing. Naruto grinned, having already gained his breathing in an instant, and leaned back against the tree. Seeing this, Moka decided to exercise her new rights and moved closer until she was resting against him. Well then, his voice was mild, as if he was just discussing the weather. I guess this makes me your boyfriend, huh? He felt her stir and looked down, seeing a pleased smile on her face. She settled herself comfortably and let out a sigh in pleasure. It was a pleasant moment and they simply laid there in silent comfort, each lost in their own thoughts. For Moka, it was almost too good to be true. She had met him only 2 days ago under very strange circumstances. He had been a complete stranger, but had a nice, if slightly perverted personality. She had been intrigued by this strange person, and that interest only grew when she caught a glimpse of the power that laid within him. To her, it was an understatement to say that Naruto was powerful. The hidden Yauki which she felt in full during her feeding was otherworldly in volume. Even her father, whose full power she had felt once before, was nothing compared to Naruto. And that brought up a curiosity within her. There was practically no yokai who were stronger than vampires. The few beings that could overpower them either employs weapons that is directly their weakness or have lived for thousands of years to accumulate power. Naruto had made it clear that he had once been human. But he also said that in his hatred and sorrow, he had consumed a demon that appeared before him. He then went on to take that demon's title and abilities. If that were true, then the demon itself must have been an ancient being. It made Moka shudder to think of the extent for Naruto's hatred if he had been able to overpower an ancient being. You cold. She felt a moment of surprise, having been so caught up in her thoughts that she almost forgot about the very person she was thinking about. Moka gently shook her head and gazed up at him in silence. She quickly slid in a smile before he noticed anything and gently laid a hand on his arm. It's nothing. I was shivering because I didn't think I could be this happy so soon. Yeah, she then saw Naruto stare out into nothing with a forlorn look on his face. Yeah, I know. It wasn't a look that she lied. Naruto had the expression of someone who hadn't seen enough happiness in his life to make a difference. Moka wanted him to stop thinking of it. Looking around, she spotted the bento that laid neatly on the ground, untouched since their kiss, and reached out to grasp it. Here. She held it out to him and smirked. "Or you let this hard work go to waste." He smiled, having caught on to what she was trying to do. He gratefully stopped thinking of the past and opened his mouth just as Moka popped in a broiled squid. He chewed and chewed while Moka waited expectantly for what he thought of the food. Finally, he finished chewing and swallowed the food. Was it good? Delicious. I'm glad. She blushed lightly and held out another piece for him, which he took and made a big show of describing how delicious it was. It was embarrassingly pleasuring to having him over-exaggerate how good it was. There was a brief bout of exasperation, but she figured that it was just how he is. Though Naruto was having a good time indulging himself as a boyfriend, he still noticed the poorly concealed figure of the girl with the big freests. She was glaring at Moka with even more anger than from the morning before, leading Naruto to believe that she had her sight set on him as well. Her intentions were thinly veiled with how strong her glare was. Seeing this, Naruto mentally made it a point to keep an eye on Moka, just in case. The afternoon air was broken by the sounds of ringing bells. Almost immediately, the entire campus seemed to have sprung to life as students filed out and headed to their dorms or clubs. It was quite a peaceful afternoon, and even the more bloodthirsty of the yokai weren't stirring up trouble. And for one Akashi Moka, she wouldn't have noticed it anyways. The pink-haired vampire was happily walking back to the dorms, humming a happy tune. Inside, she was a bubble of pure joy and excitement. It was the first time in her life that she had felt so happy, so alive. Not even her precious childhood with her mother matched the sheer volume of happiness that was inside her. That robed figure from just a few days ago had made a true prophecy. She had definitely found someone who she could be with forever. He was so powerful, yet he didn't flaunt it with arrogance. He was kind, protective, and oh so handsome. He was the perfect one and it was her luck that he had feelings for her as well. Moka blushed happily as she continued walking, not even noticing how she became the center of attention for every guy near her. Many had seen her the day before and were entranced by her beauty. But now, she seemed even more radiant than before. It baffled them, but it was also a bigger turn on. Many of the guys suddenly found themselves holding their noses to prevent nosebleeds at the level of hot and cuteness emanated by her. But not everyone liked her sudden increase in beauty. Behind all of this, Kurumu seethed with jealousy and anger. How was it that this nobody became the center of attention? She was the best of the seducers. Before, men would grovel at her feet just to have her use them as stepping stones. Yet the moment this Moka came to the scene, men began training their sights on her. Even Aono Tsukyun, her new boy toy, had stared at the pink-haired student before she forced her charms on him. Though at first, she didn't really care. For Kurumu had found an intriguing individual, one who wasn't affected by her seductive spells in the least. When the blue-haired buxom landed her eyes on him, she was so sure that he was the one. This person was handsome, indifferent, and highly resistant to her charms. It was a rare occurrence, and she was so sure that he would be that perfect mate. Yet just as her hopes were rising, Kurumu stumbled in on that despicable scene. Adbis stole him from her. It wasn't enough that men began turning their interests to her, but she even went so far as to take the one person who she believed to have been the perfect mate. It took all of her self-control just to stay still when she caught sight of that girl leaning against his chest and kissing him. Seeing her now, acting as if she was the innocent one, was enough to further inflame that anger. She was going to do something about this. And she was going to do it then. The blue-haired student clenched her fists and marched forward. Moka was completely unaware of anything, still caught up in that euphoric feeling of falling in love. But her innate instincts kicked in immediately, warning her of danger. The pink-haired vampire almost ignored it, but she did turn around just in time to see a flash of blue. The next thing she knew, Moka was sent sprawling to the ground, dazed. You bis. Blinking, Moka slowly propped herself up to see a beautiful girl glaring daggers at her. She tried to get up, but that girl immediately pushed her back down. You think you can just waltz in and take all the attention? You think that you can just take the one thing that I needed as if it was nothing? What are you talking about? Shut up. The sound of a slap echoed in the suddenly quiet air. Moka's head reeled back from the force of her blow. It became quite clear to her that this girl wasn't going to just let her go. He was the perfect one, the only one. It would have helped our race so much yet you stole him. You took him from me, the one whom he rightfully belongs to. Moka's eyes flared in anger when she realized who this person was talking about. It became all too obvious that this was about Naruto. While she could sympathize with her losing the sights of a very amazing person, her possessive way of speech regarding him was very insulting. When another hand was raised to strike her again, she swept her legs underneath, causing the person on top of her to fall as well. Seeing how she now had some breather, the vampire recovered and glared at the fallen attacker. For your information, Naruto-kun chose me, not the other way around. She wiped her cheek for any blood and began walking away. And I don't think he would appreciate it if you were talking about him as if he were just a plaything for your enjoyment. You lying piss. Kurumu stood up and hunched forward. The air suddenly began flowing around with the force of her yaki. Suddenly, wings and a tail sprouted up from her back and her nails lengthened until they became long, elongated blades. Moka immediately recognized her as a succubus. How dare you try and lie with me? Do you think a guy like that would willingly be with a no-name like you? I feel next to no yaki coming from you, meaning that you're the lowest of the scums. Yet he kissed you out of his own choice. Kurumu snarled and lunged forward. Moka just barely dodged her strikes, which sliced up the tree and stone behind her. You don't even know what are stakes for my race. We need strong men like him, rare individuals so that we won't die out. Yet you take him from me as if it was nothing. By now, all reason seemed to have left the blue-haired student as she became a whirling mass of screams and blades. Moka didn't even have the chance to defend herself, being forced to dodge strikes after strikes. All around, the ground became upturned, the trees were diced up, and the boulders by the road were pulverized. It was clear to the vampire that even one strike from those claws could mean a fatal injury. Immediately, her survival instincts kicked in and Moka raced into the trees for cover. It wasn't much as Kurumu sliced through those trees like a hot knife through butter. But it helped to divert her attention away, allowing Moka to appear behind and ram her into a tree. Her vampire strength, although diminished by the seal, was still enough to break stone. It was only because of a succubus's resilient body that the attacker brushed off that impact as if it were nothing. See? Kurumu sneered in anger and brandished her claws. And nothing like you can't even harm me. What right do you have to be with that guy? Moka didn't say anything. Instead, she was crouched low in front of her opponent, swiveling her eyes around for any possible advantage. Yet much of the trees behind her and the stones in front were shredded thanks to the succubus's numerous attacks. All too suddenly, it became clear that she was in a dire situation. You can't beat me, you can't even hurt me. The blue-haired succubus advanced forward, taking her time to draw out this victory. Why would a guy like him want to be with someone like you? Because it was my choice. Both of their heads swiveled towards the direction of the voice. There, leaning comfortably against one of the few remaining trees, was the same person they were both fighting about. Naruto crossed his arms and returned their gazes neutrally, not betraying a single thing. And Naruto-san. Kurumu quickly retracted her nails and began straightening her clothes out. Why would you say that? Obviously, this weak yokai must have caught you off guard and charmed you. I know that you can break it easily so. You're right. Naruto jumped down from his perch and began walking over to them. I can easily break any charms and illusions. That's why if there were any, it would have been gone long ago. He walked right past Kurumu, literally gluing her in place with shock. And so that little scene that you saw yesterday was entirely my choice. He grinned and wrapped his arms around Moka from behind. And I don't regret it in the least. Moka didn't know whether to glow with pleasure at his words or continue to glare at her attacker for even insinuating that she would attempt to charm him. As for Kurumu, it seemed that her mind was still trying to wrap itself around the fact that he chose Moka out of his free will and not her. But even her voice was numb. Why? I have much better assets than what she can ever have. You mean those melons you call jugs? If that's how you seduce men, then it's no wonder your race is dying out. He grinned when his hand was lightly shocked by being so close to her rosary. As for the succubus, she looked like a goldfish out of water. And you keep calling my dear Moka a nothing, as if you're so superior. Naruto's grin turned positively evil when his hand grasped at her rosary and the shocking became a little more intense. Well, if whatever you said were true, then I would naturally choose the strongest to be with me. Do you honestly think I would choose someone weaker than you? The rosary popped off and just like that, yaki that dwarfed Kurumu's flooded the entire place. It actually caught the succubus completely by surprise from how she stumbled at the force of the sudden demonic energy. As for Moka, her eyes had immediately glazed and warped when the rosary was released. Those vivid green eyes lost focus and turned red, the pupils dilated and became slits, and finally, her vibrant pink hair paled until it became almost silver in shade. When the abrupt flow of yaki faded, Akashia Moka had completely reverted into her vampire form. No, impossible. Kurumu's eyes were wide in shock when she caught sight of Moka's slitted red eyes. From those alone, she recognized the girl from before as a vampire, the elites amongst monsters. If there were any doubt from before, the sheer volume of energy being pressed down upon her was proof enough. Akashia Moka was a vampire. From behind her, Naruto briefly felt confusion. There was something slightly off with the feel of the vampire's yaki. Oh, it was still as powerful as before, perhaps more so now, thanks to the empowering blood that she had been drinking since they met. He couldn't quite place it, but it didn't really like it would be harmful, so he decided on not bringing it up. The awakened being sighed contently and leaned more into Naruto's embrace. She reached up, caressing his cheek for a brief moment before taking off his sunglasses and revealing those similar red eyes. You certainly take your time in releasing me, Naruto-sama. Naruto-sama? Oh, have you forgotten? You said that if I became yours and call you Naruto-sama, then you'd have no problem with it. Her smile was pure seduction and she slid her hand down sensuously down his face and to his neck. You don't have a problem, I hope. Not at all. Naruto grinned in return and dipped his head down to kiss her. When they parted, his smile was practically feral. If that's what you want, far be it for me to stop you. Again, there was that strange offness in her yaki. It became more prominent then and he became just a little wary of it. Yet the feeling seemed so familiar, but he just couldn't place his finger on it. Moka smiled and lightly tapped his chin with her finger. If you let me take care of this nuisance, we can return to whatever it is that you want. Oh, be my guest. Just don't rough her up too much. Of course not, Naruto-sama. She walked away from his arms, but she did give him a good view of those elegant long legs and swaying hips. How lucky can a guy be when his girlfriend's flirting with him while she's about to kick some ass? The answer? Luckiest bastard in the whole damn world. Impossible. Kurumu had been completely rooted on the spot when she caught sight of not only Moka's transformation, but Naruto's now revealed eyes. He's a vampire as well. Oh, I'm afraid you're mistaken. The succubus snapped her head in the direction of that voice. She had been so shocked that she practically forgot what she was supposed to be looking at. The awakened vampire held a hand to her hips and glaring coldly in her direction. Naruto-sama is so much more powerful than a vampire. To be comparing him to us is like comparing a dragon to a garden snake. But what is he? I honestly don't know, but if any of us is more worthy, it is me. Anyone could have heard the arrogance and haughtiness a mile away, but it was also cold hard truth. The more better mate for a powerful being would always be the strongest. And a vampire far outranks a succubus. But that didn't mean she could take it just like that. Kurumu completely forgot that she had no chance in hell and began flaring her yaki once more. She once again began growing out her claws. Her eyes narrowed in hatred at the vampire, resentful of the arrogance of this high-class creature. You think you're better? We'll see then. We'll see who will be the one bowing down. Her wings lengthened and flapped, generating impressive winds. The succubus was still for a moment, as if time had stood still. Then, she shot forward like a bullet, claws lengthened and sharpened to deadly points. It was actually pretty damn impressive that she could be so fast. Moka twisted her body out of the succubus's path and she shot right past her. Kurumu flew up in an arc and held her place up high, glaring at the vampire heatedly. Moka merely returned her gaze distantly, as if she was staring at some bug from across the room. The blue-haired succubus screamed and dove down, intent on impaling the vampire before her. Her body flattened and those wings folded up, making her as streamlined as possible. It helped and she was falling down like a warhead. The vampire's lack of movement only spurred her on, and when Moka didn't even look like she was reacting, she felt as if victory was in sight. Yet to her utter shock, that victory never came. Moka had simply held out her hands and caught her wrists. She didn't even look like she put on any effort, yet Kurumu found that she was completely suspended in her grips. The succubus could only stare in horror at this. You called me a nobody, someone not worthy of Naruto-sama. Moka released her grip. Kurumu was too shocked at this to even move away. And you're right. I doubt there will really be anyone that can match Naruto-sama's level of power. But a fist was suddenly buried into her gut and Kurumu's entire body hunched down in pain. She fell to her knees and actually vomited from the sheer force of that hit. It felt as if someone had shot a cannonball into her stomach. That was how terrible she felt at that moment. Even thought I'm not worthy, he chose me, not you. That's enough for me. Why you? I am nothing to Naruto-sama. She repeated. But you are worse than nothing. Kurumu saw a flash of movement and then, she knew nothing. Moka lowered her leg and coldly watched the crumpled form of the succubus. She had been sent flying by the force of the vampire's kick and from her lack of movement, it was highly unlikely that she was even conscious any longer. Moka smirked at her unmoving body. Know your place. From where he was, Naruto had been enjoying the spectacle. It was brief, but entertaining, a form of amusement that his girlfriend had so willingly put on just for him. The vampire smiled that sultry, sexy smile and made her way to him. He expected what she would do next and simply held out the rosary for her to take. Yet to his surprise, Moka gently pushed it away. Oh, I don't want to go just yet. He arched an eyebrow when he felt that foreign feeling in her yaki actually spike. Moka smiled and pushed him into the woods just behind them. She had quickly pushed him more in until they were in the densest part of the woods, completely hiding them from any outsiders. You see, I've been holding this in since I began drinking your blood. If I hold out any longer, I might just go mad. What are you, oof? Naruto grunted when she pushed him to the ground and straddled his waist. The vampire smirked saucily and leaned down to kiss him, making a point to steadily grind her hips along the way. He groaned, and as he returned her kiss, Naruto suddenly realized what was wrong with Moka's Yauki. She was filled with lust. His mind, now practically flying at light speed, quickly theorized that the blood she had been drinking had filled Moka with lust for him. The other persona must have had kept it in, making sure that her outer persona wouldn't be affected. Of course, the blood they drink would equal a greater amount of lust that needs to be held in check. And now that she was out, this inner persona needed a release. Let's see, she licked his blood when they first met, then inner Moka drank some after beating up Saizu. After she woke up when he carried her back, she drank some again, and then this morning as well. So that made it a total of 4 times. And inner Moka was definitely lusting now. That's kinky. Naruto grinned, wondering just what would happen if she were to drink his blood a few days more. The possibilities in his mind just sprang out, different fantasies right there. Oh, the things he could make her do once she's mad with lust. But of course, present time takes precedence. Oi, he made a few reluctant protests when the sultry vampire unbuttoned uniform coat and began working on her blouse. Naruto, despite his protest, was already working on her skirt, having free rein on copping a feel as well. Shouldn't you be asking the other Moka for permission? You two share the same body. She smiled and leaned down to kiss him once more. Same body, same mind, same soul. Trust me when I say that we both want this. She straightened up and finished taking off her blouse. The fabric slid down like silk, revealing her wrists and the collar around her neck more openly. At the same time, Naruto decided to go ahead and finish what he had started. His hand slid up from her rear and swiftly unbuttoned her skirt. It slid down as well, now revealing the vampire in only her lingerie. It was quite an impressive view. Unfortunately for Naruto, his girlfriend was less appreciative with undressing him. The blonde could only arch an eyebrow when she ripped his coat and shirt open. The buttons flew off from the force, and his 2 uniform tops were practically torn in half, revealing the white tank top underneath. Man, do I have to pay to get a new one? Moka smiled and unclasped her bra. She laid down on top of him and moaned when she felt his hand slowly pulling her panties down. The vampire sighed and actually shivered a bit. I'm a virgin. Naruto arched an eyebrow, having not expected her to be anything less at age 15 in this world. Still, the blonde gave a grin that actually had Moka just a bit fearful. Well then. He mused gently. We're just going to have to fix that now, won't we? And somewhere inside, where the core of both her and the other Moka joined together, the united mentality was actually wondering what her Yauki-induced lust had led her into. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so quickly like this video for second part of this series. And comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go, bye.